Welcome back to Midnight Curiosity. I'm Atlas, and tonight we're stepping into 5 of history's most unsettling mysteries. Disappearances that left no trace, monuments that refuse to give up their secrets, knowledge that somehow slipped through our fingers. These are the stories the world has forgotten to understand. Settle in. Close your eyes if you'd like. There's no rush, and tonight, the mysteries are Chapter 1, The Babushka Lady. November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas. The afternoon sun was bright and almost cruel, casting sharp shadows across Dealey Plaza. President John F. Kennedy's motorcade moved slowly down Elm Street, the presidential Lincoln Continental convertible gleaming in the autumn light. Thousands of people lined the streets, waving. It was the kind of day that felt ordinary and monumental at the same time, the way certain afternoons do before everything changes. The crowd was thick, hopeful. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Office workers leaned out of windows, and somewhere in that sea of faces stood a woman in a brown coat and a distinctive headscarf, the kind older Russian women wore, tied under the chin. The gunshots came. 3 shots, maybe 4. The sound echoed off the concrete buildings, impossible to locate at first. The motorcade stopped. Chaos erupted. Within moments, Kennedy was rushing to Parkland Hospital. Within hours, he was pronounced dead. The nation reeled. And in the immediate aftermath, in the confusion and the shock, this woman remained. She stood near the grassy knoll, the spot from which some witnesses believed a shot had originated. She held what looked like a camera. She filmed the motorcade. She filmed the moment. And then, she simply left. She vanished into the crowd and was never found. For years, she was barely mentioned. The Warren Commission, the official investigation into Kennedy's death, never identified her. She became known only as the Babushka Lady, a name given because of her distinctive headscarf, her babushka, the Russian word for grandmother. Witnesses who stood near her said she seemed calm, deliberate, not shocked like everyone else. She filmed continuously, as if she knew what was about to happen. But here is the strange part. Her film has never surfaced. The footage she shot, if it existed, vanished completely. Some say the FBI confiscated it. Others claim she was a Soviet agent, sent to document the assassination from Moscow. Still, others believe she simply disappeared because she was never real at all, just a confusion of identity in the chaos of that day. The theories have multiplied over decades. Some researchers claim the Babushka Lady was a tourist, an innocent bystander with a camera, and her identity was simply lost in the fog of time. Others suggest she was far more sinister, that she was part of something larger, a witness with knowledge the government wanted to keep silent. A few amateur investigators have claimed to have identified her as a Russian woman living in Dallas, though these claims have never been verified. The most persistent theory is that she filmed the assassination from an angle that would have clarified the direction of the fatal shot, and that footage was seized by authorities and destroyed. When I think about the Babushka Lady, I think about how she stands frozen in history, neither fully real nor fully mythical. There are photographs of her, fleeting glimpses in the chaos, yet she remains unknowable. She is a name without a face, a camera without film, a witness without testimony. Perhaps the most profound mysteries are the ones that exist in the margins, the ones we can almost see, but never quite grasp. She reminds me that even in our most documented moments, there are still silences we cannot fill. Chapter 2. The Lake Anjikuni Disappearance. November 1930. The far north. The Canadian subarctic, where winter comes early and stays late, where the darkness can be almost absolute for months at a time. Lake Anjikuni sits near the tree line, surrounded by endless forest and vast emptiness. The nearest settlement is Reliance, a small outpost. The nearest real town is much, much farther. This is the kind of place where civilization feels very far away, where the land dominates, and humans are merely visitors, tolerated for a season before the wilderness reclaims what it always owned. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle was making his way back to a small Inuit settlement on the shores of Lake Anjikuni. He had been away for several weeks, and he was returning to the camp where he expected to find his friends and trading partners. The settlement was small, perhaps 100 people. LaBelle had traded with them before. He knew them. He was looking forward to the warmth of the camp, the company of other humans after weeks of solitude in the frozen expanse. But as he approached, something felt wrong. The camp was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful silence of a settlement at rest, but something else. An absence, a void. When LaBelle entered the camp, he found an inexplicable scene. The tents and shelters were still standing. The fires had been extinguished, but not long ago, he thought. The embers were not entirely cold. He found food still cooking in pots, half-eaten meals, clothes scattered as if people had simply stood up and left them behind. Children's toys lay in the snow, but there were no people, not a single soul. 100 people had simply gone, vanished. The sled dogs, which LaBelle found tied to posts, were thin and desperate, half-starved, as if they had not been fed in days. Yet the camp showed no signs of struggle. There was no evidence of disease, no bodies, no graves, no indication of violence or panic. LaBelle searched the camp thoroughly, growing more disturbed with each shelter he entered. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for one impossible detail. Everyone was gone. He eventually made his way back to Reliance and reported what he had found. The authorities were skeptical at first, but when search parties reached the settlement, they found exactly what LaBelle described. The scene was genuine. 100 people had disappeared without a trace. The theories have haunted historians and researchers for nearly a century now. Some have suggested that disease swept through the camp so rapidly that the people either died or fled in panic, carrying their dead with them. But if so, where were the bodies? Where was the evidence of sickness? Others have proposed that the people simply relocated, following the caribou herds as they traditionally did. But why would they leave everything behind? The food, the supplies, the tools of survival. Why would they abandon their shelters with fires still burning? A few researchers, more prone to speculation, have suggested something more sinister. Mysterious lights seen in the sky near the camp, mass hallucinations, even abductions. Though this theory is not seriously entertained in academic circles, the most troubling aspect of the Lake Anjikuni disappearance is that it may not have happened at all. Some historians now believe the story was either greatly exaggerated or entirely fabricated. The original accounts are fragmentary and secondhand. No official records from the time seem to exist. Searches conducted decades later found no evidence of the settlement. It is possible that Joe LaBelle himself was mistaken, or that the story grew in the telling, transformed by time and distance into something more dramatic than reality. Yet the mystery persists. Whether it truly occurred or was merely a legend, the Lake Anjikuni disappearance represents our deep fear of vanishing, of being left behind, of finding only emptiness where there should be community. When I consider this mystery, I think about the vastness of the Canadian North, the way wilderness can swallow human endeavor without a sound. I imagine LaBelle walking into that camp, the growing realization that something was profoundly wrong, that the world had shifted in some fundamental way. Whether it truly happened or not, the Lake Anjikuni disappearance captures something real about our relationship with the untamed world. Sometimes, I think, the most unsettling mysteries are the ones where we can never be entirely certain they were real. Chapter 3. The Olmec Heads. thousands of years before the Spanish arrived in Mexico, before the Aztecs built their floating city, before there was writing in Mesoamerica, there was a civilization that is now almost entirely vanished. The Olmec, the mother culture. What we know about them is fragmented and mysterious, pieced together from archaeological remnants and the hazy memories of cultures that came after. They built in the jungles of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco, in the hot, wet lowlands where the land itself seems to resist the works of humans. And they left behind enormous stone heads. These are not small artifacts. They are colossal. The largest stands nearly 11 feet tall. Each one weighs many tons, some more than 40 tons. They are carved from basalt, a volcanic stone of tremendous hardness, and they represent human faces, not mythological beings, not gods, just faces, portraits of individuals. They wear distinctive helmets, often with intricate designs. Each face is unique, with different features, different expressions. Some look serene, others seem to convey strength or authority. They are masterpieces of sculpture, crafted with remarkable precision using only stone tools. The Olmec had no metal. They had no wheels, yet they quarried these enormous blocks, transported them across dozens of miles through jungle terrain, and positioned them with absolute deliberation. The mystery is not just how they were made, though that question is profound enough. The deeper mystery is why. Why invest such tremendous effort in carving and moving massive stone heads? And where did they come from? The Olmec civilization mysteriously collapsed around 400 BCE. Their cities were abandoned. The jungle reclaimed them. Millennia passed. Centuries. The forests grew so dense that the Olmec ruins vanished completely, hidden under layers of vegetation, lost to time and memory. It was not until the 19th century, more than 2,000 years later, that the Olmec Heads were rediscovered. Local people had always known they were there, of course, but to the wider world, they emerged as if from a dream, enormous stone faces staring out of the jungle with expressions that were impossible to read. For decades, anthropologists proposed wild theories. Some suggested the heads were portraits of powerful individuals, chieftains or shamans who wielded authority over their people. Others claimed they represented gods or supernatural beings. A few scholars, working with limited and fragmentary evidence, theorized that the faces depicted individuals with African features. This theory generated considerable controversy, suggesting transoceanic contact between Africa and the Americas long before Columbus. The evidence for this claim has been heavily disputed. Most mainstream archaeologists reject it, arguing that the facial features are simply those of humans who lived in Mesoamerica, and that our own biases and assumptions shape how we interpret the faces we see. What remains certain is that the Olmec chose to commemorate specific individuals in stone. The effort required was immense. Resources were diverted from subsistence and defense to create these monuments. This suggests that the people or beings portrayed were of transcendent importance. Perhaps they were rulers who demanded such tribute to their power. Perhaps they were revered ancestors, commemorated after their deaths as part of a religious or spiritual practice. Perhaps they were wise men or shamans whose knowledge was considered essential to the survival of their people. But the Olmec themselves left no written records, at least none that we can decipher. The heads guard their secrets with the silence of stone. When I contemplate the Olmec Heads, I think about the question of memory and how societies choose to remember themselves. Why carve your own face in stone? Is it an act of vanity? An insistence that you will not be forgotten? Or is it something deeper? A sacred gesture? A way of binding the living and the dead, the present and eternity? The Olmec civilization is gone, but their faces remain, staring out of the jungle with expressions that we can never fully understand. They are a reminder that the past is not simply dead and gone. It is present in stone and earth, waiting to be encountered, forever mysterious. Chapter 4. Archimedes' Lost Works. Syracuse, Sicily, the 3rd century before Christ. The ancient world was a place of extraordinary intellectual ferment. The library at Alexandria was growing, gathering scrolls and knowledge from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Philosophy flourished. Mathematics was being developed into something approximating the systems we use today. And in Syracuse, a city on the island of Sicily, there lived a man whose mind operated at a level that even his contemporaries recognized as extraordinary. His name was Archimedes, and he was perhaps the greatest engineer and mathematician the ancient world had ever produced. Archimedes was born around 287 BCE in Syracuse, and he lived and worked there for most of his life. He was the kind of genius who seemed to excel at everything. He worked on mathematics, on physics, on engineering. He invented devices. He conducted experiments. He developed methods and proofs. He created machines of war that were said to be so effective they allowed Syracuse to resist Roman siege for an extended period. The stories told about him are remarkable. He ran naked through the streets shouting "Eureka! I have found it," when he discovered principles of buoyancy while bathing. He used mirrors to focus sunlight and set Roman ships on fire. He built an orrery, a mechanical model of the cosmos. These accounts are probably exaggerated or apocryphal, but they speak to how his contemporaries and those who came after perceived him as a man whose intellect operated on a plane beyond the ordinary. Archimedes wrote extensively during his lifetime. He produced treatises on mathematics, on physics, on engineering. These works were widely known and respected in the ancient world. They were copied. They were studied. They influenced the intellectual development of subsequent centuries. But when the fall of Rome came, when the institutions that had preserved and transmitted knowledge fell into decay, many of Archimedes' works were lost. Scrolls deteriorated, libraries burned, or were neglected. The transmission of knowledge broke down. Of the perhaps 15 major works Archimedes produced, only a handful survived into the medieval period. The others vanished. Some works disappeared entirely, known to us only through fragments quoted in the writings of other ancient authors. We know Archimedes wrote about conical sections, about spiral curves, about floating bodies. We have his method, a remarkable work in which he describes using mechanical reasoning to approach mathematical problems, weighing shapes and figures against one another as if on a balance scale. This work was lost for many centuries, known only through references in other texts, before a copy was rediscovered in a Byzantine monastery in the 20th century. But there are works that have vanished completely, leaving only traces in the ancient literature, references to treatises on angles, on optics, on music. What knowledge did they contain? What problems did they solve? What insights did they offer? The historical tragedy of Archimedes' lost works lies not just in the specific documents that are missing, though that is significant. The tragedy is that we cannot know what Archimedes might have discovered or proven had he lived in an age with better tools or less interruption. How far might mathematics have advanced if his methods had not been lost? How much further ahead of his time might he have moved human knowledge? Some historians have speculated that had certain works survived, the development of calculus might have come centuries earlier. The scientific revolution might have been accelerated. We will never know. And that unknowability itself is a form of mystery, a loss we can sense, but never fully measure. When I think of Archimedes and his lost works, I imagine a library burning. I imagine scrolls turned to ash. I imagine words that were meant to illuminate human understanding, scattered like dust on the wind. There is something melancholic about this mystery, not the tragedy of sudden disappearance or violence, but the slower tragedy of forgetting. The way civilizations can simply let knowledge slip away. Archimedes remains, in some form, through the works that survived. But his full genius is hidden from us, lost in a past we can never fully recover. Chapter 5. The Lycurgus Cup. The British Museum. Modern day. In a glass case, under carefully controlled lighting, sits an object of profound strangeness. To the casual observer, it might appear to be a simple Roman drinking cup, carved from stone or glass. It is small, roughly the size of a teacup, with a smooth exterior showing decorative scenes. But the Lycurgus Cup contains a secret that was not fully understood until the 20th century, a mystery embedded in its very substance. The cup dates to around the 4th century CE, the later days of the Roman Empire. It was created with exceptional craftsmanship. The images carved into its exterior depict the mythological scene of King Lycurgus being punished by the god Dionysus for his impiety and cruelty toward the god's followers. The figures are delicate and finely detailed. But the mystery of the Lycurgus Cup lies not in what it shows, but in what it is made of. The cup appears to be made of jade or stone. When viewed in ordinary daylight, its color is a pale, almost opaque greenish white. But when a light source is placed inside the cup, something impossible happens. The cup transforms. The pale, opaque stone becomes transparent, and instead of green, the cup glows a deep, rich crimson red. For centuries, the cup was treated as a museum piece, a fine example of Roman craftsmanship. Nothing more. No one fully understood the phenomenon. Some assumed it was a trick of light. Others thought perhaps it was made of some rare stone that changed color under certain conditions. But when the cup was finally examined scientifically in the 20th century, the explanation proved far more remarkable than anyone had anticipated. The cup is made of glass, not stone, Roman glass of exceptional purity. But woven throughout the glass are particles of colloidal gold and silver. These metallic particles, present in such minute quantities that they are invisible to the naked eye, have the remarkable property of absorbing certain wavelengths of light and reflecting others. In reflected light, under daylight conditions, the metallic particles scatter light in such a way that the cup appears pale and greenish. But when light passes through the glass from within, the optical properties of the gold and silver change. They absorb the longer wavelengths and reflect the shorter ones, causing the cup to glow an intense red. This discovery was remarkable for a simple reason. The technology required to create such an object should not have existed in the 4th century CE. The ability to work with colloidal metals at such a scale, with such precision and such understanding, seems far beyond what we know the Romans possessed. The Romans were skilled glassmakers. They created beautiful glasswork throughout their empire. But nothing in our records suggests they had the chemical knowledge or the technical capability to create this particular effect. No other object like it has ever been found. There are no ancient texts describing its creation. There are no instructions or explanations. The Lycurgus Cup appears to be unique, a one-of-a-kind creation whose method of manufacture remains mysterious. The theories about the cup have ranged widely. Some scholars suggest that the Romans possessed chemical and alchemical knowledge that has been lost, that the cup represents a technique that was never recorded and therefore vanished when its creators died. Others propose that the cup was created by accident, perhaps through some fortunate combination of materials that the craftsmen did not fully understand. A few researchers have claimed that the cup represents evidence of contact with far older, more advanced civilizations whose knowledge influenced the Romans. But all of these remain speculation. The cup itself tells no story. It bears no inscription explaining its creation. It simply glows, year after year, in its museum case, a small object that seems to contain a technological impossibility, a mystery fashioned from glass and light. What strikes me most about the Lycurgus Cup is how it represents a knowledge that exists but cannot be accessed. We can see the effect. We can understand, in modern terms, the science behind it. But the original method, the way the Romans actually achieved this result, remains hidden. It is a reminder that our ancestors were not simple or unsophisticated. They possessed knowledge and skills that we cannot fully reconstruct. And sometimes, we encounter the evidence of their achievement, but not the explanation. The Lycurgus Cup glows in its case, a small red light burning across the centuries, a question posed in glass and metallic gold. 5 mysteries. 5 silences that history has left behind. A woman in a brown coat who filmed an assassination and then vanished. A settlement where 100 people disappeared without a trace, or perhaps never were at all. Enormous stone faces carved by a civilization that left no written explanation. Mathematical treatises that the ancient world could not preserve. A cup that glows with a light whose creation we cannot reproduce. These are the stories we do not know how to tell. These are the doors that do not open. Some will be solved someday, perhaps. Someone will discover Babushka Lady's identity. Evidence may emerge about Lake Anjikuni. New Olmec artifacts will be found, perhaps with inscriptions that explain the heads. A scroll containing Archimedes' lost works may turn up in some vault or collection. And perhaps, someone will discover how the Romans created their impossible cup. But perhaps not. Perhaps these mysteries are meant to remain exactly as they are, incomplete, unsettling, beautiful in their refusal to be fully known. May they keep you company through the quiet hours ahead. Sleep well. This is Atlas, signing off.